You're humming along with your strategy, your program, your project, and then a major crash happens where things are majorly derailed. Quite a bit of money is lost, a lot of people that are very angry, and quite a few people just look bad all the way around. But you need to fix getting things back on track, and you need to do it ASAP. So you focus on the post-mortem. The post-mortem is where you figure out just what went wrong, what caused the whole massive failure. And you will find in a post-mortem, it is not a single failure, but a series of failures, a cascade of failures that resulted in this failure. And the way that the program, the thing that you're running, worked, it was absorbing the damage from those failures. But then it got to a point where it couldn't absorb anymore, and then there was the crash, the major derailment. Now, when doing postmortems, you have to worry about how people interact with each other, how activities were working together to determine that cascade. But when presenting your findings for a postmortem, do not focus on specific activities and especially not people, because there are people within your company who are mad and will want to weaponize that. And they will result in people getting demoted, moved around in the company, and terminated. And I've seen this and how people can use postmortems. So please try to focus on with recommendations more geared towards the environment, on the way the environment is and how people and activities should fit within the environment. Have the shift of blame to the environment, not to people. The environment was just not as understood as well as people thought. That was the problem. It wasn't the people's performance. Now, mind you, maybe some people were the problem, but we don't want politics to weaponize the learnings of the postmortem to destroy that person and their career. So focus on the environment as much. And focus on visuals, on how to explain that environment and how to best work within that environment. I use journey maps, process maps, phase diagrams, things that show how people should change and navigate through an environment. Now, the key thing to when you have a massive failure, there were things that you were doing well during the failure, that before the failure and during the failure, and some things that you weren't. It's very likely that the things you weren't doing well could have caused it. So if that's the case, you scale back. Focus on more of the stuff that you're really good at doing and making sure that your program, your strategy is really emphasizing that at its core. And then start focusing on the stuff you're not so good at in little drips so that you don't cause another derailment, another crash. And getting back on track with whatever it is you're doing, it's a journey. The first part of the journey is mourning the loss, like of looking bad, of being involved in a crash and being involved in something derailed. And then there's the period where you just don't care. Well, this is working now. Well, I don't care if it passes or fails. And then the point where, well, you're actually excited now. Well, this is going well. It's going well before. The crash is never going to happen again. And then a minor speed bump happens. And then people think another crash is going to happen. And everyone jumps up in the air. And there's a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations that really don't lead anywhere, just driven primarily by fear. So you got to make people aware of that sort of journey, of the emotional journey when something big fails. A lot of people aren't good at where big things fail. They have an emotional investment to it. And so a lot of the journey is trying to get that emotional investment away from the failure and into what they're currently doing, so that they'll fight to make sure that the thing doesn't fail again or get derailed again. Now, I talked pretty high level about this sort of stuff. Now, maybe some specifics, like I'm thinking of one in particular. Let's call him Bob. Okay, Bob was a new director at a company. He was brought in before my time when I was brought in there, and I was brought in as a consultant. Now, Bob wanted to push in a way of delivering products to the industry, innovative products. Now, the challenge is that the company was very process-centric in terms of how it did things. And Bob wanted to move that to a design-centric mentality, because with innovation and design, they come pretty much hand in hand. Okay, and so then there was a crash with what Bob was doing, especially when there was one important project being launched, going through and going to be launched later on in the process. And there was a crash, a derailment. Well, a post-mortem was done. And the people, since they were consulting friends of the executive team, they started pointing blame at the activities and specifically at Bob and what Bob was doing. It was Bob's fault for doing all this stuff, when really it wasn't Bob's fault. Bob was not popular, yeah, like that's the case, but some of the stuff he was doing well, and some of the stuff in the way that this whole strategy was being ran was going well. It was primarily the environment. There was conflict between the process-centric approach of how the company was working and the design-centric approach that Bob was wanting to have the company adopt. And that was creating friction. And so visuals were pulled together to show that friction. And I had a hand in making those videos. I tried my best to save Bob, but Bob was demoted to manager and then demoted again. And I was pretty sure they were kept on demoting him until he was out of the company. But some visuals to show on how design activities and design practices would fit within a process-centric environment. Because they're not, they are pretty different when you look at them from the nuances. And certain design activities worked at the company. They worked very well at the company. And so the strategy and its recommendations and its principles were tailored so that the company focused more on the stuff it could work. All those other best practices regarding design and innovation, well, that was put on the back burner, and we had a schedule to let it drip in a little bit to help the company sort of get used to that sort of stuff, those activities, and get a chance of getting good at them. Now, for the journey, Bob wasn't the only one hurt by all of this. In the post-mortem, people looked at it and they started playing the blame game. A lot of people were moved around in the company. A lot of people were terminated. They were walked out by security. They were fired on the spot. And then an hour later, they were being walked out. A lot of people remembered that. And so the journey back to getting things back on track, people remembered that. And they just did not trust the executive team after that. They thought when there was be another failure, there would be the same sort of things happening as it did before. And so it took a lot of healing. It took a lot of moving around of the executive team itself and restructuring of the company itself to get people to trust the company again. So my takeaway from that is primarily just how important the postmortem is, that you don't weaponize it. So you don't get it so that people can use it as an excuse to go after someone and destroy someone, because I've seen the worst things done under the guise of something being good for the company. So when things crash and burn, do your best to help move away from the investment of that failure, your emotional investment. Move to the investment of something that is to the greater good, to the future, because then you'll fight to make that reality happen. You can't change the past, but you can change the future.